welcome back to the Prime Focus Goalkeeping channel. I'm Brandon Miller and I'll be your host for today. Today we're going to have a little conversation about punching. I've had a lot of questions about how goalkeepers punch in traffic, how they control the ball, should they go one-handed or two-handed? Well, today we're going to walk through all of it. All right, so we're going to start out. How I typically like to work on punching with my goalkeepers is starting them on their knees. Right, so there's not a lot of movement, very controlled balls, but focusing on the technique. Right, so punching is a lot like kicking. You have to be focused on your technique more so than focused on power. Right, so we're not elite boxers. We're not trying to knock anyone out. We're simply trying to control the ball and put it in an area where it's not dangerous. All right, so the big thing is not so much worrying about a massive swing, whether it's one-handed, whether it's two-handed. A lot of the power comes from the pace of the ball, right? So guiding that ball and putting it into an area that isn't dangerous and utilizing the pace in the connection as opposed to trying to punch it all the way across the field. So we're just gonna start out two-handed. All right, so the big thing with two-handed, I've seen a lot of goalkeepers, they try to two-hand punch like this, right? We're thinking more so about surface area, thinking about how we can keep our hands together and create an area where we can connect with the ball consistently. Right, another issue that we see a lot of times with goalkeepers is they'll go one hand, their dominant hand, a little bit more than the other hand, and they end up punching unevenly on the ball, where the ball hits one hand and then it'll knock the other hand and you're not getting the distance that you want. Right, so focusing on putting our hands together in a good place where we have a good surface area for the ball and not so much swinging really hard, but focusing on good connection. So Pablo's about 5 yards away. He's going to toss a few to me, and we're just focusing on popping it right back to Pablo, right? Let's notice how we're not getting a massive swing. I'm not even fully extending my arms, and I'm getting the ball back to Pablo with ease, right? So looking at, right, ball goes a little bit lower. How do I get it with a little more height? Maybe I want to drive it a little more. How do I go through the ball a little bit more? But focusing on simple contact, right? It's not so much about swinging hard. It's all about contact, all right? So that's focusing on two hands, noticing how I'm keeping my hands together and I'm focusing on getting good contact, but I'm not all the way extending, right? Because that's where we're looking for a ton of power, but it's not about power, it's about connection. So that's how we're looking at two-handed. We've got the technique there. Now how do we go one-handed, right? Two-handed situations happen a lot with floated balls into the 18 where we're coming through traffic and we're not 100% sure we're gonna catch, so we're looking at punching it. Now with one-handed punches, a lot of times those balls are whipped into the 18, they're coming from one side and we're trying to guide it to the other side, right? So looking at one-handed punches, again, we're looking at connection. Now here is where goalkeeper coaches tend to vary. Some say you can have your wrist here, some say you rotate your hand here. For me, I'm a big fan of going here, specifically talking about balls that are coming across and we're trying to guide across here. But looking at going forward, again, it's simply connection. So Pablo's gonna toss, we're looking at right hand, it's simply one hand connection, right? Getting just a little bit of jab on it, right? But getting good connection. Making sure we're focusing on finding the right part of our hand, right in the middle, and popping it right back. I'm right hand dominant, but sometimes balls come from my left side and I need to also use my left hand, right? You can use your right hand, you can come across and pop here, but sometimes it's easier for me to come across and get a little bit more height and a punch here. So I like to have my goalkeepers utilize both hands. They're not necessarily gonna use them at an equal amount in a game, right? You may be 90% right hand and maybe one of those times you gotta punch with your left hand, right? So I wanna make sure you're confident with both. So doing the same thing on the other side, ball coming with our left hand and focusing on connection. What part of my hand am I hitting? Am I in the middle? Am I utilizing that connection and getting the pace forward? That's all that we're looking for, just focusing on connection here. Let's do one more, good. And now we're gonna have Pablo back up a little bit, right? So we're just focusing on technique there. Now, how do we get a little bit more distance into it? Doesn't have to be a massive swing here where I'm contouring my whole body and punching through it. It's still about the technique. I'm just going a little bit harder now. So we'll start out two-handed. Pablo's gonna toss out to me. Ball comes in. How do I get a little bit more height on it? How do I get the connection on it? Focusing on two hands, right? Keeping them together and just a good firm punch. Doesn't have to be a big swing. I'm not getting a huge extension out here. It's just good connection. All it is good connection and I'm going 7, 8, 9, 10 yards now. Let's do a few more. So focusing on Pablo tosses in, and we're going for a little bit more distance now, right? It's still not a massive swing. It's just a little bit more connection, focusing on keeping your hands together and popping it right back. And now we're getting a little bit more distance. Let's go one more. And good, let's go one-handed now. So now we're looking at one-handed. How do we get the same distance, the same connection? It's a little bit more difficult one-handed because our surface area isn't as big. It's a lot about connection here. It's a lot about what part of the hand we hit. So from there, we're gonna take it into the goal. We're gonna make it a little bit more game realistic. Now that we have the technique, now we know what part of the hands that we're hitting. We're focusing on this middle part here and how we connect with the ball there. Now we're gonna go into goal and we're gonna see some more game realistic type situations. So we've got our sturdy mannequin here, Fred. What we're gonna do is we're gonna be a little bit off of Fred and we're gonna see some toss balls in. From this angle, from this side, right, we're trying to guide that ball across and out of danger. Right, so balls whipped in from the far side, we're having to come through traffic and we're having to punch, trying to guide it forward, often sends it back into traffic. Trying to punch that ball back this way, especially one-handed, can be tough. The important thing here is to take the momentum, the pace of the ball that's already going to your left and simply change the direction of the ball so it's not going towards attackers, but it's now up and over and out of danger. All right, so let's see a few here. So we're setting the position, that ball's tossed in. Yep, we're looking one-handed, we work across, and we punch out. All right, again, not so much focus on knocking the ball out of the park, but focusing on connection here, and we're out. All right, so that one goes a little bit forward because I've caught it on the outside part of my hand. We're focusing on the connection in the middle. We're here, guiding the ball across and out. Again, focusing on the height. Thinking about, am I getting too far under the ball where it pops up, or am I getting too far over the ball and it's going down into the ground? So finding that nice middle ground is where we'll get the good height and distance. Across, and we're out. Let's go one more there. So the movement, the momentum, and the ball going out. Well done. All right, so let's switch to the other side now. Now for me, I'm right-handed, right hand dominant. That's where I feel most comfortable punching with. And I typically feel most comfortable punching one-handed. So from this left side, where balls are being whipped in from my left side and coming across my body here, right? It was a bit easier on my right side because I'm coming across my body to guide it across. Now, from this left side, I either have to go with my left hand or I have to figure out how to most comfortably go with my right hand. We'll also take a look at what two hands look like and why that's a little bit more uncomfortable in these situations. So starting off, I don't typically go with my weak hand, which is my left hand, especially in games. But I think it's important to still have the ability to do both because there are times where that ball gets a little bit higher than where I can typically get to with my right arm, and I may need to go with my left hand, even if it's just to get a little something on it to change the direction of the ball to take it away from the attacker. So we'll start out, do a couple with my left hand, just focusing again on connection. How do I get that ball out of the area and change the direction of the ball, focusing on contact. Ball's tossed in, I adjust my feet, and I punch, right? Catching it on the end of my hand, again, is gonna cause it to go forward. When I'm trying to punch it this way and I catch it on the end here, that ball's gonna go that way. So ball's tossed in again. We're here, up and over. All right, so now we're gonna look at the right hand, what it looks like from a ball cross it on the left side to come across and punch with our right hand. It's a little bit more difficult on this side because you're trying to send the ball this way. The way our hand is, the shape of our hand, sometimes we get underneath it and that ball ends up popping straight up, right? So we really want to focus on, this may be a time to turn our hand shape a little bit more and focus on guiding it across here as opposed to coming underneath it. So we're here, ball's tossed in, right's across, and we just guide it. Now it's a little bit tougher there. You see that the distance, the height doesn't go as well because it's a really tough timing to get across here. So ball's tossed in, we're here, and we're just trying to guide it across. That ball pops up, right? Because from here, the trajectory of the ball, the trajectory of my arm, it's not so much guiding it back across. A lot of times it's popping it out. It's harder to go with the ball here on the right side. So let's go one more. Tossed in, and we just push it across. right? So that's not bad. That one's not bad. It's very difficult, but a lot of goalkeepers who are right-handed or from the other side who are left-handed prefer to go with their strong hand here. So I think it's important that you have the ability to do both. Now, we want to look at our last piece from this side, and then we're going to do a few straight on. We're going to look at what going two-handed on this side looks like, right? Two-handed from either side. What does that look like? One of the reasons we don't go two-handed is because we don't get the extension that we do with a single arm here or a single arm here. A lot of times this holds us back a little bit more. We just can't get as far. And so that's one of the main reasons why I don't suggest from these whipped in balls. Floated balls are a little bit different, but from a whipped in ball from these angles, going with two hands is a little bit tougher. You just don't get the extension that you want, but we're gonna look at a couple. So that ball's tossed in. Where does the direction look like to then take the ball on? We're doing one more. If we're aiming a little bit further out, how do we get that ball high and wide out there? Last scenario we're gonna look at. We're gonna look at some punches going straight on. And so we're looking at scenarios in a game where maybe it's a free kick from 40, 45 yards out and that ball's floated into the box, or it's driven into the box where we don't feel comfortable enough to come out and claim it with two hands and hold it. So we're gonna look at punching it. And a lot of these situations, we go with two hands, we're a little bit more powerful with our jump, we're protecting ourselves, and we're just looking to box out into safer areas. Now, looking at these types of punches, a lot of these punches, we're looking for a little bit more height here, because we're not really typically punching out into wider areas where there aren't as many players. In these situations, we're typically punching out down the middle of the field or on the angle a little bit in the field where there's still more players. So punching it directly out on a lower line gets that ball out faster, and we're typically out a little bit higher and doesn't give us enough time to recover, right? How do we look at these balls? Looking at a little bit more height here, getting underneath the ball a little bit more, two hands, larger surface area, going for height, but also still going for distance. So from here, we're gonna work just behind our mannequin. We're gonna have Pablo toss these balls in, and we're gonna look at how we can get connection coming through traffic, right? If we have to take out our mannequin, we take out our mannequin, but focusing on connection and finding some height and some distance on these balls. So we're starting here, we're set, ball's tossed in, we come through, and that ball goes high. Now, depending on the height of the ball, we've got to work on the timing. That ball's floated a little bit higher. When we're trying to punch here, our direction's gonna go up. When we're able to go through a little bit here, we're going height and distance. When we're going through here, we're simply going with a line drive punch here. So ball again, ball's tossed in, looking at the height, and that ball goes out. Focusing on the connection, focusing on what part of the ball we hit, ball in. And again, getting underneath it, right? Getting underneath it and catching it on the ends of our hands is gonna pop that ball up. Sometimes you just gotta go through them, right? The field players, you're gonna get hurt if you go in soft. There's not a problem with you coming through it, but making sure you're connecting with the ball. Good, let's go one more here. Yep, through, and we're out. Good. So that's pretty much all we have for punching, right? We talked about the technique of it, connecting with it with both hands, focusing on catching it in the middle as opposed to getting it down low or getting it up high. What does that look like from a single hand perspective? What does that look like from a two hand perspective? What does that look like from the ball being whipped in from the side? Where do we want to punch? Do we want to punch to the middle? Do we want to punch across and continue the momentum? Looking from the right side, from the left side, whatever side where your weak hand isn't strongest on, are we using our strong hand on that side? Are we using our weak hand? Are we going with both hands? And then looking at the trajectory of the ball. Is it floated in? Is it whipped in? What type of punch are we using on those different types of surfaces? Those are all decisions that we have to make, but the basis is focusing on connection over power. You're not boxers, you're not fighters, you're goalkeepers. Focus on changing the direction as opposed to changing the power of the ball. That's pretty much all we have for punching today. Hope you all learned a lot. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. But otherwise, stay focused and we'll see you next time.